The Collector's Library of Best Love Classics is just $19.95. To order, call this toll-free number now.
This is CNN.
From Washington, Crossfire. On the left, Mike Kinsley. On the right, John Sununu. Tonight, Family Matters. In the Crossfire, Gary Bauer, President of the Family Research Council, and Kim Gandy, Executive Vice President of the National Organization for Women.
Good evening. Welcome to Crossfire. There's been a lot of campaign talk about family values lately. On the Republican side, Vice President Quayle has taken the lead on the issue for some time now. He took up the issue once again in a speech on Tuesday.
One reason George Bush will win this election is that the American people know his character. He is honest, not slick. He offers leadership. He doesn't pander to special interests. And he is willing to stand up for basic values rather than treating all lifestyle choices as morally equivalent.
In spite of the fact that a lot of Democrats have been chiding the Vice President for zeroing in on the issue, even Bill Clinton has been trying to claim some of the political high ground on the family value issue for himself. What specifically is the family value thing? Can we actually define it, or do you just know it when you see it? And most important, is there any real difference among the candidates? I think I know what it's all about. How about you, Mike?
John, no one is chiding Vice President Quayle for talking about family values. Democrats are chiding him for talking hypocritical nonsense about family values. Gary, I want to ask you about a story in the Washington Post this morning. Apparently, a couple weeks ago on 2020, Barbara Walters asked President Bush, would he knowingly put a homosexual in his cabinet?
Right.
And Bush said, there are no litmus tests on this, and there never will be in my administration. There are now a lot of groups like yours that are very angry at Bush. Who's right on this? George Bush or Lou Sheldon of the Traditional Values Coalition?
Well, I think the president should have said the obvious, which is if you're dealing with somebody who's an avowed homosexual, that person would be very uncomfortable in George Bush's cabinet because on the face of it, he would stand for values that are inconsistent with the values of George Bush and certainly inconsistent with the values of the great majority of people who voted for him.
So you're saying that there should be a litmus test, and George Bush was wrong to say there isn't a litmus test.
I'm saying that for an avowed homosexual to serve in a conservative Republican administration raises serious questions about whether that administration understands what this debate is about around the country.
So there should be a litmus test?
I think that it's inappropriate for a conservative president to have an avowed homosexual in his cabinet.
There should be a litmus test.
You know, Michael, you always do this. I'm answering the question directly. I just choose not to use your words.
All right. So if there should be a litmus test, which is what I take to be the meaning of your answer, shouldn't George Bush say so one way or the other so that people such as yourself who feel one way and people perhaps such as Kim, I don't want to know, but people who do feel the opposite way can reach a decision on it?
Right. I think George Bush tried to handle the question the best he could, but between now and November, I believe he will make it clearer where he stands on family values. And I'll go further. If he doesn't make it clear, there's no way he's going to win. The constituency that elected him, the constituency that will re-elect him is a constituency that feels strongly.
How does it hurt family values if the best qualified person for, say, Attorney General or head of the National Endowment for the Arts or some important administration job, the best qualified person happens to be gay? How does it hurt family values for the best qualified person to get the job?
Well, look, Michael, we're talking right now in the country about a very radical gay rights movement, a movement that wants to legitimize the idea of homosexuality, that's attempting to introduce curriculum into the classroom, a movement that has been very aggressive in fighting traditional groups around the country. That person would not fit into a Bush cabinet.
We're talking about someone who's gay, not someone who adopts every position of gay rights groups that you disagree with.
When somebody leads with their sexual preference, and that's the definition of
you're
an avowed
You're leading with
homosexual.
your sexual preference, if I may say so.
I've never brought it up. I never bring up my sexual activities in public policy, but there are folks out there that seem to want to make sexual activity the center point of everything they do, and those people do not belong in the Bush cabinet.
Kim, in spite of the fact that Mike in his introduction demonstrates that he doesn't get it, are you now ready to acknowledge that family values is an important political issue?
I think that family values are very important. The question is, whose family and whose values? George Bush seems to think that you're only entitled to have a family if your family looks like his, if you're wealthy enough to afford nannies and country clubs, if you have a Barbara at home. But today's families don't look like
Kim, I have
that.
news for you. The people that family values mean something to are not that family. It's the heartland of America. They're the ones that care about the message that's going out there.
And they
Why do
care
you
about
reject
the
it as a
same-
political? Why do you
They care
reject
about the same
reject it as a
family
political
values that we
issue?
care about. It is a political issue.
They're
The
not hearing that
only
when they listen to you.
The only question is, whose values are you talking about? I think family values are very important. I think families need to be able to operate and run their families on a living minimum wage, which we don't have in this country. I think women should not lose their jobs if they have to take time off to have children. I think women should have pay equity with men, that they should get equal pay for equal work, that we should have adequate child care in this country. There should never be another latchkey child in this country with the wealth that we have. Those are the kind of family values that we're talking about.
Do you accept the traditional family structure as a goal?
I think that the traditional family structure is wonderful where it happens, but so often it doesn't happen. And to make it a goal, as with so many of these welfare policies, that a woman should marry anybody. Marry the guy on the corner, marry a drug addict, marry somebody who beats you. Simply to be married is an outrageous extension
You're opposed
of
to those
the
welfare
idea.
reform policies that have been adopted, say, in Wisconsin, that are being proposed in California and New Jersey, states by Democrat governors as well as Republican governors.
There are states that have absolutely punitive policies that are determined to do nothing more than to punish the women who are on welfare, when in fact they spread misinformation. The average family on welfare has 1.8 children, which is substantially smaller than the average family size of the rest of the country.
Gary, let me ask you about one point Kim brought up, which is this question of women who lose their jobs because they take time off to have kids. Now, there was a family leave bill which said, like every other advanced democracy in the country, in the world, the United States would join that group by saying that women have the right to have their jobs and not lose their jobs when they take time off to have a child or to take care of a sick child, things like that. President Bush vetoed it. Was that veto a pro-family thing to do?
Well, the president vetoed that on the basis of a concern about job creation. We supported an alternative proposal that I think would have helped women. But there's nothing pro-family about putting so many regulations on business that you get the same kind of zero job growth that we've seen in Western Europe for years. But I'd like to get back to something Kim said. Kim, you said that it's okay when a traditional family happens, but are you willing to say public policy ought to try to encourage it? I mean, I'm shocked that now is so out of step that they're not even for the welfare reform that's sweeping the country that tries to get families to stay together.
The fact that something may be sweeping the country does not mean that it's right. In fact, I think a lot of people don't understand what's in those policies. But the fact is that a government cannot force a father to stay in the home if he's decided that he's going to leave. But what the government can do is the government can make sure that child support is paid so that we don't have these children who are left with single mothers being the largest single group in poverty, the largest group of the homeless
we agree on child support.
Well, let's do something
when the
about
government's
it.
giving
Why
out
doesn't
tax
the
money,
Bush administration do something about the collection of child support?
They have focused on computerizing that so we can track the parent across the state border.
Computers, let's get the IRS on the case.
Let's follow them in terms of their driver's license. Let's follow them in terms of their paycheck.
They have done
Let's follow them in terms of their tax deduction.
nothing to federalize child support enforcement across state lines.
You're wrong.
I practiced family law for 12 years.
I was part of a program that did that.
And it's the most
then you
difficult.
ought to pay attention to what's being done.
I understand the laws
You haven't read the minutes
well.
of the last meeting, and a lot has been done in it.
All right, hold it. I'm going to change the subject.
But you cannot say nothing's been done when there's both legislation, programs, regulation, funding, and grants in exactly those areas out there.
Until the IRS and the Social Security Administration are used to enforce the payment of child support in this country the same way they are used to enforce the payment of income taxes, we are not going to have a significant change.
That's exactly what the use of computers is all about.
All right.
They're not doing
We're all for computers. We're all for computers. We got to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little taxes, talk a little Murphy Brown, a few other things.
They're tiny portraits of a people. With personalities as varied as our own. They sing of our heroes, echo with our history. They fascinate us with exquisite detail. For some, they're miniature masterpieces. Others just think they're pretty. There are as many reasons to love stamps as there are people who love them. These are stamps worth saving. Ask for the hummingbird stamps at your post office now.
No matter what our beliefs or where we come from, chances are if we fly, we do it on an airplane made by Boeing.
On CNN tomorrow, abortion ads. Are they going too far? On Morning News. Then on Cryer and Company, all the candidates say they're pro-family. But what do they really mean? All tomorrow on CNN.
Welcome back to Crossfire. We're talking about family values. Who's got them, who's against them, and what role they'll play in the 1992 election campaign. Bush and Clinton both say they represent the interests of families and the other guy doesn't. Ross Perot has yet to be heard from on this hot subject. Our guests, Kim Gandy, Executive Vice President of the National Organization for Women, and Gary Bauer, President of the Family Research Council. Mr. Bauer was a domestic policy advisor to that great family man, Ronald Reagan. Gary Bauer, one of Bill Clinton's proposals, economic proposals, is to shift the tax burden off of families a bit by enlarging the tax deduction for children and making up the money by raising the taxes a bit on the well-to-do. Now, Bush is against that, but isn't that a pro-family proposal?
Well, the problem with it is that Clinton doesn't get it that the country is overtaxed, period. In fact, Ronald Reagan did double the personal exemption to $2,000. Bush is on record wanting to do the same. What the administration's against and what we're against is raising the taxes on anybody else. The country is not undertaxed,
Wait a minute.
Mike.
Wait a minute. There's a budget rule which we all agree to that you can't simply say we're going to double this exemption, we're going to reduce this tax without saying where the money comes from.
Right.
Bill Clinton says we can try to cut the spending, we're going to do that, but meanwhile, let's say take the same amount of money we're going to raise and just raise a little bit more of it from the well-to-do and a little bit less of it from people with a lot of kids.
No, but
now, why isn't that a pro-family? Why isn't your group for this if you're claiming to be pro-family instead of just pro-Republican tax policy?
We were for an increase in the personal exemption before Governor Clinton was a blip on the radar. What we're against is gutting the income of other people in order to pay for this program.
Clinton's income's going to be gutted. Come on.
Clinton says, meanwhile, that's the key word. He needs to identify now where he's going to make cuts. There are plenty of places to make cuts to help pay for tax relief for families.
But why wouldn't those cuts be made from the income of the wealthiest people in this country? In the last 20 to 30 years, the actual tax paid by the wealthiest part of the country has been almost cut in half.
Why use a good idea as an excuse to tax when you can get the revenue from the added revenue you get if you cut the taxes on capital gains, the way we've done it in the past?
Or perhaps we could cut the defense budget. What an interesting idea. But of course, then
the capital gains tax a pro-family policy in the Republican mind?
Absolutely, because it generates job growth and families need jobs.
The magic
It cuts the capital gains tax on selling your home. You don't think the families own home?
Too, I bet.
Kim, let me ask you a question. One of the differences is that there's not a difference on title, but a difference on substance on issues. President had a child care bill. You and your organization opposed it because it gave the money to families directly instead of going through the bureaucracy.
In fact, it didn't do that. What it was a
Absolutely
tax credit that poor families could not use until April 15th when they got their money back in a lump sum. And somehow they were supposed to manage to pay for the child care.
But she's making a misrepresentation.
Out of their own pockets.
That's not
until
true.
They
there was
got
a voucher
that tax
structure.
credit.
There was a voucher structure in there that allowed them to take care of the kids at home, community-based cares or church-based care or the regular child care structure.
Part of that program was that it allowed parochial schools and churches to use that money, to use our tax dollars on capital building programs. It allowed them to discriminate on the basis of religion.
You've got to stick to the facts, and those aren't the facts.
On the basis
in
of
fact,
gender.
the first child care bill introduced, supported by Now and liberals on Capitol Hill, was so ridiculous that it went absolutely nowhere, because it actually specified that if an inner city parent was bold enough to send her child to a school that happened to have a religious figure displayed, in order to get government help, the religious figure would have to be covered up.
Well,
far be it that our children might see a cross or a statue.
The first child care bill was one that was introduced by Walter Mondale and in fact passed the Congress in 1970.
And was vetoed by Richard Nixon because it would set up a massive federal bureaucracy, and Nixon was right.
Richard Nixon called child care the Sovietization of American children.
And the kind of bill about the bill we got passed, and the one that you opposed, that provides money directly to families. You seem to be against any time you send money, whether it's tax credit or direct vouchers to families, you want it to go through the bureaucracy. That's the difference between family values and family values.
The money comes away from publicly funded institutions, such as your idea that we're going to take money out of the public school system,
why do you want to take a poor family and not let
put
them,
it into private schools?
Why can't a poor family choose to send their child and get a little help to do so to a child care center in the basement of a church? That's what most inner city families want to do.
And in fact, they are doing that under the current child care bill.
They wouldn't be able to do it with any federal help.
If you want to talk about choices for poor families, let's talk about choices of being able to have a job that pays a minimum wage that they can feed their families on. Let's talk about the choice
economic
of having a roof over their heads.
And the liberal policies have never created those jobs.
And the last 12 years of the Reagan and Bush administrations have thrown more families into homelessness and poverty than at any time in history.
We're not going to rehearse the past decade on either side here. I want to ask you about Murphy Brown, because I promised the viewers I would. Why are people like you and Dan Quayle obsessed with what happens on this sitcom like Murphy Brown and don't seem to care about another cultural figure like Arnold Schwarzenegger, George Bush's great pal, who is promoting violence, including violence against police, in the popular culture all the time?
Right, Michael, you're the only one that seems obsessed with Murphy Brown. Dan Quayle had one line in an 8-page speech, and all you could talk about was that one line. I happen to think...
Dan Quayle put that line in the speech specifically because he wanted to set off fireworks. You knew it.
And you fell for it. And you fell for it, Michael.
You'd react.
Look, the bottom line is there is too much violence in Hollywood, and if you want to form a new alliance of liberals and conservatives to send a message to Hollywood...
Would you tell your friend George Bush that he ought to fire Arnold Schwarzenegger as head of his physical fitness commission because he's promoting violence in Hollywood? You want to do that right now? Here's your chance.
Next time I'm over for dinner with the president, I'll pass that on to him.
Suggest it.
Mr. President, I think you ought to get tougher on issues like violence in the movies.
Fire Arnold Schwarzenegger.
And I think you need to talk to your friend, Mr. Clinton, and ask him to advocate the same sort of thing.
Clinton has been very good on these sorts of things.
When we come back, we'll continue this discussion on the value of values.
Hello, I'm Susan Rook. At the top of the hour, Boris Yeltsin makes a surprise offer to the leaders at the G7 summit. In California, a new ad campaign urges children to just say no to sex. And millions of dollars offered for an environmentally correct refrigerator. All on Prime News, right after Crossfire.
Suddenly, vitamins are all over the news.
Fact is, 2 out of 3 adults don't get all that's recommended in their diets.
2 out of 3?
Wonder if I'm getting the vitamins I should.
There is a cereal, though, that has 100% of 10 essential vitamins. Whole Grain Total.
Of course.
Just one bowl gives you a full day's allowance of these vitamins. Total. One bowl, 100%.
With all the vitamin news, I'm eating Total.
Of course.
Introducing United Airlines' renowned international service to cities throughout Latin America. Come fly the airline that's uniting the world. Come fly the friendly skies.
I see many things.
Some companies go to great lengths to try to predict the future.
I see a ray of sunshine through a thick fog.
But the only way to succeed is to prepare for whatever the future brings. That's why Georgia Pacific has become a low-cost producer of wood products, pulp, and paper. It's how Georgia Pacific prospers in good times or not so good times. Because if you don't plan for the future today, you just might not be around tomorrow.
At GMC Truck, we've seen days like this for over 80 years. And have learned the value of a van that gives you the most room in its class. The added safety of four-wheel anti-lock brakes. The traction of full-time all-wheel drive. And the feeling of security that can only come from a van that's built as strong as a truck. Safari from GMC Truck. More proof of the strength of experience.
Kim Gandy, one of the issues that you brought up was children in poverty. The state with the worst record on children in poverty and continuing to get worse is the state of Arkansas. Are you going to support Bill Clinton on the basis of his commitment to child poverty on that?
Bill Clinton actually has made quite a number of strides in the state of Arkansas on the issue of child poverty, but you cannot eradicate child poverty in an 8-year governorship.
A lot of states went the other direction, Kim. A lot of states went the other direction.
In fact, one of the worst states in the country is the state of Louisiana, and part of that is because of the teen pregnancy rate. And why is that? Because it's one of the few states that doesn't have sex education. Now, why isn't that part of our family values, that we don't want our young people to get pregnant because they don't know what they're doing? We had young girls who came into clinics in New Orleans saying, but I took one of my mother's birth control pills, I don't know why it didn't work.
State that had the lowest poverty rate for children was my state of New Hampshire. We don't have mandatory sex education either, so don't equate the two of them erroneously. You're taking one statistic out of it.
You also have a predominantly white, predominantly well-off, predominantly blue-collar population.
Kim, you've done it again. I mean, some of the worst states in the country, like New York, have the most explicit sex education courses possible. They're now passing out condoms in the 7th grade, and their illegitimacy rate has gone through the roof.
New York's not anywhere close to Louisiana, Mississippi, and Arkansas.
Don't act as if these ideas that a few condoms and birth control pills are going to solve the illegitimacy problem in this country.
Doesn't have anything to do with that. What it has to do with is education.
No,
We're
what
not
it has
even
to do
talking
with
about
is a
birth
failure
control.
to teach
We are
reliable standards of right and wrong, which groups like now continually resist doing.
And as you well know, family values have to be taught at home. Let's take a look at the Bush administration and the Reagan administration.
And they have to be supported at school
greed and
other
wealth.
places.
And you can look at their children and see where it got them. Neil Bush and the savings and loan scandal.
Oh, my goodness.
Now Jeb Bush raking in the bucks, cleaning up the Kuwaiti oil fields with a big contract. What does that say about the greed of the Bush administration?
The Bush family can defend the issue of sex
come on, I'm
education.
entitled to a question here. We're almost out of time. Gary, wouldn't a pro-family administration supply enough money for kids to be vaccinated? You know, there are a lot of childhood diseases that a few years ago, a decade ago, were almost wiped out in this country, and they're now running rampant. In part, at least, you would have to admit, I would hope, because kids aren't getting vaccinated because there isn't enough money in the public health system to vaccinate them.
That's right,
now,
because Congress did not provide the money the president asked
garbage.
for. I know that statistic.
Oh, you lied about this once before, John. I'm not the same.
Well, let me lie about it today.
statistic is
the
correct,
fact is the administration has proposed money for those things, and it hasn't gotten through. But, Michael, you're still dealing with symptoms. You talk about all these various problems
Symptoms? I'm dealing with diseases.
No,
kids are getting sick and dying because they don't get shots.
And the
What could be
reason
simpler than
that kids are having so many health problems in this country is because folks like you are unwilling to say the obvious. They need 2 parents. They need 2 people to care for them. That's when kids come out the best.
I will say the obvious. It is good when people have 2 parents. That can't always happen. It is good also when they have shots. Would you say the connection between shots and diseases is a lot closer than the connection between 2 parents?
The fact is that bad problems with health for children is linked to illegitimacy, and all the studies show that.
And Lou Sullivan has been campaigning on that same issue with that same Congress.
Don't tell
That's
me that
a
the
fact.
Democrats in Congress are trying to prevent kids from getting shots.
No, they're just sitting there giving you hot rhetoric.
Time. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Kim.
My pleasure.
John and I may be back in a moment.
We've seen some incredible changes take place in the last couple years. Changes that will affect our families, our jobs, even our whole planet. In fact, the prospects for a better world are as good today as they've ever been. Strength and resolve have kept us free during the most troubling moments of this century and can keep us free into the next. And in this uncertain world, it's important to remember the real peace dividend is peace.
I just picked up the mail and I noticed my tax refund. Compared to what I'm paying in taxes today, it's nothing.
I remember when this used to mean something.
I've got to find a way to keep more of what I earn.
Common sense says you should keep as much of what you earn as you can.
Well, at least this will pay for my phone bill.
And you can earn income that's tax-free with Fidelity Investments, America's largest mutual fund company.
I was on my way to my new accountant.
He's in all taxable investments.
Yeah, and his tax bracket.
I knew I'd pay taxes on my salary, but my investment income?
He's not going to like the news.
So, what do we got? The good news is that we have some great ideas for next year. Next year?
With Fidelity's tax-free funds, you can earn income 100% free from federal taxes, and in many states, free from state taxes as well. Plus, there's no sales charge. Call now for this free booklet, A Common Sense Guide to Tax-Free Investing. Call 1-800-328-8500. Fidelity Investments. Common sense. Uncommon results.
Are you finding it harder and harder to get home in time to watch the evening news?
And that's the news. Good night.
What's the rush? Headline News gives you the latest news, business, and sports around the clock.
John, you know, no one is against family values, as I was trying to explain to you. All I can say is if the Republicans think they can call a capital gains tax cut a family values issue and not call parental leave policy a family values issue, they are really got things completely upside down.
You don't get it. The federal government intruding on family policy is an invasion of family values issues.
Every advanced country in the world has policies about about allowing mothers to know they can take time off without being fired. That is a pro-family
Companies
policy.
should give time off for that. The federal government should not pass a law to require that. That's the difference. And the system can work and does work the other way.
Don't say you're pro-family policy.
You don't get
if
it.
You're not for it.
You just don't get
you're
it.
Right, I don't get it.
You using the words doesn't give you the issue.
From the right, he's John Sununu. We'll be back tomorrow. And Prime News is next. It's a show the whole family can enjoy. Here's a look at what's coming up.
Thank you, Michael. Coming up, the guessing game is on as Bill Clinton closes in on a choice for vice president. We'll have an exclusive report on another matter, the matter of the plight of a large group of Haitian refugees who have tested positive for the HIV virus. And it's not a high-wire act, but it's very high intention, nevertheless. That and more just ahead on Prime News.
Coming up, Prime News, followed by Larry King Live after a word from your local cable system here on CNN.
Years ago, the great famous Notre Dame football coach, Knute Rockne, was asked by a newspaper reporter if he thought crossing himself helped win football games. He smiled and said, "It does only if our tackles are bigger than their tackles." It's always been people, whether it's an organization, whether it's a ball team, or whether it's a clothing store like Reichardt's. Let me introduce you to the people from Reichardt's. This is Ray Ageniga, Richard Ageniga, Moe Ewan, Alphonse Catalino, Wao Vu, Jennifer Collins, Sue Dunnigan, Linda Peterson, John Reese, Don O'Brien, Herb Hine, Duke Reichhardt, Greg Loning, Sue Stilo, Zoe Rawson, Fran Schrader, Ann Pfeiffer, Sheila Yoder, and Mike Jones. We really have confident people here, and you'll be satisfied for a long time when you shop here, and I'll see to it, because I'm here. I'm Bill Reichhardt, and I own the store.
Working to be number one.
You know, we're like family at Carl Chevrolet Geo, and we believe our customers feel that, because that's the way we treat you, like family. Take service, for instance. We realize bringing in your car can be a major inconvenience, so our service doors open at 6:30 in the morning. Then one of our courtesy cars will not only take you to work, but also pick you up and bring you back.
Ankeny, exit 90 off I-35. Carl Chevrolet Geo.
We moved back to St. Louis just before the '82 series, and I got seats for Game 7. Now, that was a homecoming that could never be beat. Never.
It will be 100 years before I forget that cat.